Hello, welcome back to my channel. I want to talk a little bit about the way I annotate books. I received a comment recently requesting this video and pretty excited about it, to be fair, because the way I annotate has kind of evolved since I began reading. I've definitely upped my annotating game recently, and I love to annotate. It does take more time when I'm reading, but I love to annotate. It just means I get more time with the book. I'm really connecting to the characters and really paying attention to what I'm reading. Now, when I'm annotating my books, I don't always annotate books I'm reading for the first time. I very rarely annotate books I'm reading for the very first time because when I'm reading for the first time, I get so captivated by the books that it tends to be that I forget to annotate. I just want to consume it all at such a fast rate. And, especially when action is unfolding, you can get so stuck into the book that you forget about the outside world. Nothing else exists apart from the book in your hand. And I'm one of those readers that when I'm reading, it's like a movie playing in my head. So when I'm reading for the first time, I completely forget about anything outside that book. So I tend to keep my annotating for a second reread because then, first of all, I'm absorbing clues that I hadn't clocked onto the first time I read them, which means I can really pay attention to those little nuanced details. And second of all, it just means that I get to pay attention more to those little details and connect clues that I didn't see the first time I read them. And, highlight quotes that I love and get to spend a bit more time concentrating on what was being written rather than the story that's being told, if that makes sense. So if there's a book where there are multi books in like a like the multiverse, say like Sarah J. Maas, Melissa K. Roach, they write books within the same universe, and they're separate series, but the universes are connected, whether they're in different realities, stuff like that, or even Brandon Sanderson. So when I'm rereading, I love to see the clues about those multiverses and see where they connect. That's like the most fun part for me. But that's enough jabbering. I'm going to talk more into the details of the way I annotate because it does differ on the book that I'm reading. So we're going to start with Brandon Sanderson. The way I annotate Brandon Sanderson's book is different to the way I annotate any other book. First of all, because it's a high fantasy book. And second of all, the books he writes tend to be within the Cosmere, which is a multiverse. So we're going to go into that. Okay, so I have picked up his thinner Cosmere books because the other ones are too big and I can't pick it up with this hand since I broke my thumb 2 years ago. So, Tress of the Emerald Sea is one of his books within the Cosmere, and this is probably not my most annotated Brandon Sanderson book, but it does have, hopefully that doesn't make too much noise, but the way I annotate Brandon Sanderson books, first of all, the tabs I use, I have recently, actually probably in the last year or two, have been liking matching the tabs to the cover. So if the cover is green, I'll try and use as much green tabs as possible. I don't always stick to this just because I don't like when I have, how does this make sense? I don't like when I have multiple tabs that have just collected because no covers have matched that color, and then I end up with so much of that one particular batch of colors. So I do like to use up all my tabs. And the ones I order is from Amazon. I'll try and link them, but I just love the variety of, this is 2 packs by the way, but I love the variety of colors you can get. I do need to order another pack. I know it doesn't look like I need another pack, but I've got so much mismatched colors now, and because I annotate so much, I tend to need multiples of the same color, and I'm running low on having multiples of the same color. Anyway, I will try and link that in my bio. But again, I'm veering off track. But I like to, as much as possible, match the tabs to the covers. I just think they're aesthetically pleasing to look at. But my high fantasy annotating is world building, main character, important, foreshadow, plot, notes, and then the cosmic for Brandon Sanderson. So with world building, that would be anything that builds the world that is being written. So literally building scenes, so the way the forest looks, the way a library looks, pretty self-explanatory. But then magic systems, I'll annotate the magic system, if gods and religions are being explained, backgrounds, stuff like that, that will be annotated using the world building. Main character, this would be anything to do with the main character that the book is being written about. So for this one, it's Tress, and it would be her development, the way she's dealing with certain situations, the way she's building relationships with the characters, and this would just be her relationship with other characters, not characters in between themselves, and focused on her role in the book. So what she's started off as, well, I guess that'd be really the character development. That's the main focus of those tabs, would be how she was in the beginning, if she was timid, if she was shy, you know, I will tab that. But then I will also tab her journey and how she evolves, and how she takes on the adventure. That's pretty much it for that tab. Important, foreshadow, that's pretty much self-explanatory. Important is anything that I think is important to the plot or to the world, and this can be a variety of things. If something's said, that's a bit of like a clue of what could happen to the plot. That's not foreshadow. Or if there's anything that comes up that I'm just like, oh, that's interesting, I wonder what that's about, I will tab it as important. It doesn't actually have to necessarily be intricate to the plot, but anything that kind of throws up a flag in my head, and I'm like, this seems like an important part of the book, of the cosme, of the main character, like anything like that. Foreshadow obviously is self-explanatory. Anything that foreshadows what the plot is going in, the direction it's going in, or what the ending is going to be, stuff like that. Plot, I'm just tabbing what the plot of the book is, how it starts and how it evolves, and then if any subplots come up of it through the book. Notes is just stuff that I have questions of. So if a character is connected to another book and they've said something that's kind of funky or throws a question up in my head, I would have that with the notes, and then I'll just write down the notes of what I'm questioning in the book, or I'll highlight it, stuff like that. It's literally just personal. It's just what I have questions of. And then the Cosmere tab is just having anything that references the Cosmere, and this obviously isn't always easy because there's so many books within the Cosmere, and I wouldn't have read all the books in the reading order I'm doing. But if there's any references to characters that have been in previous books that are in different alternate realities, anything that references the Cosmere that I've previously read that throws up a familiar feeling, those will be tabbed. I think for this one, it was literally, do I want to spoil it? Yeah, I'm not going to spoil it. But anything to do with references to other books, to other characters, I will tab. And sometimes it'll be, no, that's still a spoiler, but that's how I would annotate my Brandon Sanderson books. When I annotate, when I'm highlighting for Brandon Sanderson books, it is I will particularly highlight Cosmere references and a particular character that seems to come up a lot. I will highlight his bits because he's a very curious character that I don't really know what his role is. I'm hoping that's not really a spoiler for anyone, but I'll mostly highlight Cosmere, sometimes quotes, but I'll use a different colour. but in Brandon Sanderson books, the most I'll highlight is just Cosmere references, just because I want to be able to go back to them and spot them more easily, especially when there's a lot of tabs. I'll highlight the most important Cosmere references, not just the normal little small ones. It will just be the big ones that mean something. Those will be highlighted. So that is how I typically annotate a high fantasy. This one is pretty particular to Brandon Sanderson's, just because I'm doing a whole reading order and the way I'm annotating is going throughout all the books. But I mostly read fantasy romance. It is my favorite genre ever. I have quite a lot of books that are high fantasy or sci-fi. Actually, not that many sci-fi, but the majority of my collection is indeed fantasy romance and new adult fantasy romance. So we'll go into how I annotate those kind of books, which is also differs a little bit. I think I'm going to start with the biggest one that I annotate, which is just a given. Sarah J. Maas. I have annotated all her books. I've read all her books multiple times. My favourite books of hers is this one. I love this book with everything inside of me. It's not my favourite book of all time. I don't think any of Sarah J. Maas's books are my favourite of all time anymore, because I've kind of evolved as a reader. Throne of Glass will be one of my top 2 series of all time. Lady of Darkness is my number 1. I love that series so much. I'm so excited. I'm getting off track again. Back on track. Anyway, the way I annotate Sarah J. Maas books is a little bit different, but not really that different. Mostly it's different because of the multiverse that within these books. The way I annotate these is actually the way I annotate Melissa K. Rowich's books, because she also has a multiverse. So we're going to get into this one. This one is my most heavily tabbed book. Yeah, the sheer amount of tabs is insane. This book just speaks to me on a level. So the way I would annotate a Sarah J. Maas book is I will annotate the main character. So for this one, it's Nesta. I'll also I will also annotate their relationship. So in this book, is this going to be spoiler? No, it's not going to be spoiler. Nesta and Cassian. Then I'll annotate character relationships. So this will be relationships Cassian has with other characters, that other characters have between themselves. Won't necessarily be Nesta and other characters, unless it's a friendship, like the trio that cements itself in this. But because her development is so rooted in the way that she behaves with other characters, I will typically use her main character tab to tab the way the relationships are evolving, because it speaks to her development as well as the character relationships that are forming. So in this one, I would use her tab because it's so vitally important to the way that she's developing within this book, rather than just a normal character relationship. I'll also annotate world building, which is the same as when I annotate Brandon Sanderson. This will be the world, the scenes that are being set up, the religion, the gods, the magic, fighting styles and stuff like that. That would be annotating using the world building. It's what helps build the picture in your head, and it's what helps build the world that is created. I also annotate using notes. Again, this is the same. I will just annotate things that I have questions of, or I think is just a bit interesting, intriguing, stuff like that, or quotes or stuff like that. I'll just, if I'm highlighting something. Multiverse, pretty self-explanatory. This is just anything that's referenced that could mean it's connected to other worlds, or there's so many in this book in particular. But yeah, it's just anything that throws up a flag. This is connected to Throne of Glass, or this is connected to Crescent City because it's referenced there. And theories, I will also use this tab and I will write and highlight. There is so much writing and highlighting in this book, but multiverse would be used when I think something's connected, or I think something might mean something else in a different book, and then I'll write what my theory is in my head and highlight it. And I also have like sticky notes in here because sometimes I have so much to say that I don't want to use up all the space. There's not that much space obviously within the book, so sometimes I'll use like a sticky notes. I don't want to show you too much, but they just look like this, it's just like a translucent tab, and that just means I have more space to write without getting on the the typings of the book. I will also add that to my link tree if I can figure out how to do it. Also, within this book, I also have a tab for favourite and right hand. I, especially since reading this book, haven't been the biggest fan of right hand, and I know that that's probably very controversial and people are going to hate me for that, but I just wanted to annotate his journey from me liking him to me not liking him, and also Feyre and Nesta. You know, they changed within this book. Feyre changed a lot in this book, so I just wanted to annotate what was happening between, you know, the OG main characters and why I changed my mind and why I don't like Rysand. So that is a tab that I've done. I also have a tab for Cassian, and this is just for Cassian. So it's not Nesta and Cassian where I'm documenting their relationship. This is Cassian's development, because I don't think, okay, this might be a minor spoiler, so I'm sorry. Skip like 10 seconds. I'm not the biggest fan of Cassian. I don't think he's the best mate. I think there's a lot of things he could have done better, and I think he definitely prioritizes Rysand over Nesta. And I'm sorry, but I think mates should prioritize their mate over anything else. I know that, you know, best buds for centuries, blah blah, grew up together, saved each other's lives. That's great, but that's your mate. And you know, they're supposed to be your entire world, and you're not treating them like they're your entire world. Rant over. And then I also annotate the plot, because I do think the plot is going to surpass, I think it's pretty clear that it surpasses this book. And there's a very solid subplot that's happening within this, while we're also, you know, this is a book about Nesta's development, but we're also getting a subplot that's kind of developing, that's going to go throughout further books in the series. So I also documented that as well. Now, the way I would annotate a normal fantasy romance that doesn't have a multiverse, that literally just has the one main series, whether they have spin-offs in the future, I don't know, but obviously that's not clear when you're reading the first books in the series. But what I would do is I annotate world building, character relationships, foreshadow, important plot notes, and then the only thing that's different in the way I annotate normal fantasy romances is the FMC and the MMC have the same tab. So it's just the one tab that documents the FMC and the MMC's individual development, which is huge in something like the Jasad Crown. They both have such huge developments, but also their relationship together. I could have used different tabs to document their relationship, but I was finding it hard to keep on track with so many tabs. And when I'm annotating a book that doesn't have a multiverse, that just has the one series, I don't want to tab so much information. I just want to tab the most important parts and keep it at that, apart from like when they are multiverse, because then there's so much that I want to tab just for theories and stuff. But I don't want to spend so much time annotating every little thing in a normal fantasy romance. So for this, I would just tab the FMC and the MMC's development, and then also their relationship together as they grow. And I think that's how I've recently changed it. I used to do it as individual tabs, but I just found it so much easier, first of all, and they're so tied together that it does make sense to use the same tab, because we're following both of their journeys, both of their developments and their relationship together. So I feel like it's perfect to use the same tab to document the two. Their individual relationships with other characters will use the character relationship tab, just because they both have different ways that they have relationships with other characters, especially in the Jasad Heir and the Jasad Crown, because the FMC has gone through so much trauma that she's working through. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, that's how I tab a normal fantasy romance. I did also forget to mention that I love to highlight the main page of the book, the title series, and then the author, and then I also put the date that I started the book, I'll also put the date on a reread. So if I read this in July of 2025 and I decided to pick it up in November 2025, I'll put November 2025 underneath, and then I'll just have a list of dates. Because I reread so many of my favourite books, I love to see the dates of when I first picked it up and then the reread, and then it also helps me document on how many times I've reread a book. Now, this is only something I've been recently doing for the last year. My Sarah J Maas books, they should have so many dates in them, but they have no dates in them. First of all, because I kind of started Throne of Glass with the paperbacks, and I got hardbacks like 2-3 years ago from my boyfriend, so those would have dates missing anyway. But this date thing and highlighting the main page is something I've done in the last year, and I love the way it looks. And it just means I can go back to the book and see the date I picked up rather than having to go to Goodreads, because I do look for the dates a lot, and I just love the way it looks, especially when I take pictures, and I think it's so cute. But I'll use the highlight that I'm using to highlight the book. So for the Jasad Crown, I'm using purple, but if I was using orange, I would highlight the main page orange. It would be the predominant colour of highlight that I'm using within that book. And then if I'm using a different highlight to highlight different bits, like quotes and stuff, but I won't use that on the main page, just the main highlighter. Okay, well, that is pretty much a wrap on the way I annotate and highlight my books. I predominantly also highlight and annotate books on a second read, because it just means that those are books that I'm definitely going to keep. Those are books that are going to stay on my shelves. I'm never going to sell them. I'm never going to give them away. And it means for sure that I loved them. Where if I'm annotating a book for the first time, that's on the first book of the series, if I end up DNFing it 50% of the way through, I can't really go give that to my local library, because I like to donate normal standard editions of books to my local library. And I don't want to give something that's been written in, that has a date in. So when I'm doing a reread, I will always, well, not always, but I will most like 80% of the time end up annotating it, just because I love having annotations in books that I love. I feel like it shows how well loved it is, and that I really took the time to pay attention to that book. But when I'm reading it for the first time, I don't want to hold on to books that I don't love or have DNF'd, because I don't have room. Like, I have 610 books and I have no room at this point, and I can't afford to keep books that I don't like. So yeah, I'll mostly keep annotating, highlighting, writing in books for a reread, or if I'm reading the next book in a series that I love, then I also highlight, like I am with the Jasad Crown. This is the first time I'm reading this book, but I am highlighting and annotating because I know I'm going to love it. Because I loved the Jasad Crown, I'm never going to get rid of this book, so I can annotate and highlight it for the first read ever. But I will also do the highlighting of the title page and put the date in on the top when I finished a book for the first time. I don't do that on the first moment I pick it up, just because, again, if I don't end up loving it, don't really want to give away a book that's been written in, so I'll keep that to the end. And when I finish the book and I loved it, then I will highlight and put the date in, so I'll keep that for that. But yeah, that is all. That pretty much wraps up how I annotate my books. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this was illuminating. I know that I've changed a lot of the way I the way I annotate books, by picking up bits that other people have done, and it kind of helped me tailor my annotating game to the way it is right now. So it's always useful to watch how other people annotate, because it just helps you kind of grow the way you annotate your books. I also do sell these annotating bookmarks with little charms on my Etsy, which is linked in my link tree. If you're interested, you can fully tailor these the way you like to annotate. So if you don't tab world building, you can change the spaces of where the tabs go and what they're called. But I've just found this so useful for annotating. It's changed the way I annotate, and it makes it so much easier than the way I used to do it. But yeah, I hope you love this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!